Hello, welcome to Feminist Timeline. This is going to be a series tracking through my life, being influenced, affected, and trying desperately to escape feminism. And I learned a lot along the way. On this first video on my channel, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I was born into the generation that went through it all. Year 1955. The year Disneyland first opened, the first McDonald's opened, Rosa Parks refused to sit in the back of the bus, and James Dean smashed his Porsche 550 head-on into a driver coming in the opposite direction and died. An auspicious year, I would say. Having lived through it all, I can say, looking back over my life experience, that one of the most destructive movements that arose during my life was feminism. It's not that women didn't have problems to be addressed, but all of them have always been with us and a part of the crosses we have to bear in this fallen world. They're part of the human condition. As Jesus said, the poor will always be with you. But as I have observed over the years, commonplace misfortunes become issues to be solved when they are marketed by the left as oppression. This series of videos is a feminist timeline through my lived experience. I want to help young people see what happened and why. My heart goes out to young people who have to live in the fallout of feminism in particular, in the skewed world where nature is abhorred, God appears to have been dethroned, and nothing works anymore. Seeds were planted in 1955. They were actually planted before that. The seeds were planted at the turn of the 20th century. But in my childhood, feminism was still kind of in the seedling stage. It hadn't quite gotten its lethal witchcraft potion on everybody. So let's begin with something easy, a best-selling novel, a movie, and a soap opera. Soap operas were huge in the 1950s and 60s. They're to keep young mothers company while they did the ironing, while the baby was having a nap and they could have a cup of coffee, or, wash the dishes. That was a companion in the house while the husband was at work. My generation was the first to have TV in every home. Before this, there was radio, and if you wanted visuals, you had to go to the movies. TV was eventually in every home, and those who wished to keep it out failed. Peer pressure is a powerful thing, especially when you have kids and they go to school with other kids that all have televisions. TV is the master programmer. And looking back, I can see the insidious influence of early television on my psyche. All shows contain propaganda, scenes that slipped into your mind unnoticed until you heard the words in your head or saw the actors in your dreams. Back then, glamour was the key. Beauty and subtle seduction, the lure of free, beachy lifestyles, far from small-town New England. It was California dreamin', baby. Can you tell I'm a little passionate about this subject? So the first thing I could remember, casting my mind back, the first thing that comes to my memory that planted the seeds of feminism is the novel Peyton Place. In 1956, Grace Metalius wrote a novel that would become one of the highest-selling novels of all time. 10 million copies were sold worldwide, and it still remains the fourth biggest-selling novel after Don Quixote, A Tale of Two Cities, and Lord of the Rings. Can't believe Lord of the Rings isn't more than those other two, but that's what it said. Its 1957 film adaptation had a significant, if complicated, influence on early feminism in America. While it wasn't an explicitly feminist story, its exploration of female desire, social repression, and the hypocrisy of small-town morality challenged the cultural norms of the 1950s and helped lay the groundwork for the feminist movements of the 1960s and 70s. And I want to say that small-town hypocrisy is only hypocrisy in light of the illusion that was being spun on television of what small-town morality was supposed to be. Just ponder that for a minute. Humans are humans. and we all mess up. And people struggle a lot with just life, With its many complex characters and at that time, relatable situations, Peyton Place was the first primetime soap opera, the perfect twice-weekly digest of all the struggles of modern housewives in small-town America. I remember being at a neighbor's house one summer afternoon, not sure how old I was, but I remember asking an older girl what her favorite TV show was, and she said Peyton Place. The town I grew up was kind of like that, actually. Very small New England town I grew up in, with farms and all kinds of stuff like that. We had a college, it was a farms and New England. In 1957, there is a scene of Allison Mackenzie running to school through the woods and across a field, past farms and through the town. This brought back so many memories for me of doing the exact same thing. We were raised in nature and free to run around without fear. It was a very nostalgic scene for me, and I kind of miss those days, actually. The fresh air. Oh. I wasn't allowed to watch soap operas and would rather be outside during the summer months in any case, but among the teenage girls, I discovered this show to be extremely popular. The cast was the start of many movie star careers in the 1960s, Mia Farrow, Barbara Parkins, Ryan O'Neal, and Ed Nelson, among others. In doing the research for this video, I watched the 1957 film starring Lana Turner, the ex-bombshell, now in a genteel mother role as Constance Mackenzie. I realized that the theme music had been in the background of my life throughout my childhood. Like the Perry Mason theme music, I used to hear it through my bedroom wall before falling to sleep. It played in all the stores. It was Muzak. Muzak, baby. My point is that Peyton Place was ubiquitous, and its themes about feminine discontent were amplified into the early stages of the feminist movement. Here's a breakdown of how Peyton Place influenced early feminism, and I'll admit I got some of this from ChatGPT, because I was trying to formulate, because I'm not a feminist and I've always resisted feminism, I didn't know what the feminist points of view were, and that's what I wanted to find out. Exposing female sexuality and repression. There was a lot of talk about repression back then because of Freud and also because of Victorian England. Everyone was repressed. And having lived in England for almost 10 years, I will tell you one thing about the Brits. They are not sexually repressed. And I really don't think they ever were. Anyway. The novel was groundbreaking for its frank portrayal of female sexuality, including teenage sexual exploration, incest, rape, and extramarital affairs. Although I'm not sure about the extramarital affairs. There was one. And an extramarital affair. There are scenes of high school dances and kids making out in cars, kind of like a precursor to Stephen King's Carrie high school scenes. By our standards, they're extremely chaste and play out the old school mating game of push and pull. In these types of scenes, I think it's a stretch to suggest that the girls were disempowered. This was the dance that led to marriage, and everyone knew it. Back in those days, empowerment meant keeping your man away, but on his toes. There was an art to it. It's called a dance. Young people these days think boomers had it so good. Some did, but Hollywood created lots of glamour back then, and they still pointed their Vaseline-coated camera lenses at the nuclear family, giving the impression that we were all affluent, calm, stable, funny, and from California. We weren't. If you were a working-class girl like I was, your only real hope of a future was marriage, or being a school teacher, a nurse, or a secretary. That was the options we had. And it's funny, to be a school teacher meant you were going to be an old maid. To be a nurse meant you probably could be married. But to be a secretary meant that you sat on your boss's lap and were basically kind of an open-minded girl. We all called career girls back then. Oh, she's going to be a career girl. What you don't understand and may never understand is that for us, our grandfathers fought in World War I. Mine in the trenches in Normandy. Fathers were veterans of World War II. Those guys got married and had lots of kids. We looked up to these men, but they also had issues. One huge issue was alcoholism. It was in every family that I can remember. Untreated PTSD treated with home remedies like scotch on the rocks, screwdrivers, and highballs. There was also a sea of cigarette smoke, causing health problems for delicate types like me breathing secondhand smoke. Stay-at-home mothers had soap operas telling them how boring their lives were and how they should want more. Lots were addicted to Valium or highballs or both. Amongst the washing machines, fridges, and stoves, the vacuum cleaners, and mid-century furniture, anger seethed. I'm not sure why, but silent generation women had plenty of anger issues. Some husbands were abusive. Our next-door neighbor's dad would get violent, and I was always shocked to see the fist holes in the walls inside their house. One girl was thrown down the stairs and had bruises to prove it. We got hit with belts, hairbrushes, rulers, and ping-pong paddles. But we had it so good. We were all Beaver Cleaver. Oh, Wonderful Years. You know that show, Wonder Years? It was like that. It was like that in some respects. A lot of these women came from poverty as well. And this was the beginning of the middle class. I think these women, they were born during the Great Depression, and they grew up during the blackouts in World War II. When actually, my mother said she remembered World War II, so she was born in 1934. So in World War II, they turned out all the lights in the cities and the towns at night so that the airplanes flying over would not see house lights and know where to drop the bombs. That was the idea. And then boys were drafted and sent to fight. And for every son that was killed in the war, the family would put a candle in the window. And you could look out and see the candles in people's windows who had lost their sons in the war. So they grew up in the Depression and the World War II, and they felt really hard done by, and they felt deprived. Not all the women who went to work in those factories enjoyed it. Not all of them wanted to work in those factories. Work wasn't a new thing. Feminists didn't introduce work to women. Working class women have always worked. These women married young, they became mothers, and TV told them to buy frozen vegetables, cereals, cleaning products, and to long for bubble baths, and running along beaches into the arms of some Romeo from a television program who can't resist their perfume. It's quite phenomenal when I think back on it. Wow. What they saw on TV and in the movies was so glamorized. Who's the demon of glamour? Illusion, disillusion, discontent, rebellion, and disillusionment. A dark spirit, a very dark spirit indeed. But they did. So Peyton Place, the book, the movies, the soap opera, dealt with many of these issues, coming to a climax with the rape of Selena Cross by her alcoholic stepfather. She, as the English say, fell pregnant. Seems like this fueled what would later become a hatred of men, an irrational hatred, a male phobia, and an excuse for the A word, or a deletion of the child. But not quite yet. It wasn't quite there yet. We still had the church fighting all this. Characters like Allison Mackenzie, who was the character representing the author, Grace Metalius, and Constance Mackenzie, her mother, showed inner conflicts women faced between societal expectations and personal desires. A prime example was the beloved school teacher who all the students were hoping would be made principal, and when there was a job opening. She wanted the job, but it went to a man who bargained for a much higher salary. She bowed out gracefully, but a sense of unfairness lingered among the students, and that was one of the first scenes in the movie, and you know, that was a big issue. The feminists made that into a big issue. In contrast, Constance, who's a single mother, runs a dress shop and offers Selena Cross a job. Selena, who's very poor, but she's so happy to have such an opportunity that she offers to work there for free. This was so typical of how we thought back then. For one, a job was not what a woman's life was supposed to be about. And two, due to perhaps our strong Christian upbringing, we had a desire to serve. So women were often sacrificial, whereas the man who took the principal's job insisted on a higher salary, which he got, and the women were willing to work for free if it was a cool place to work, and she was so honored to be asked. As a single mother, Constance doesn't date. In fact, dating was relatively unheard of back then, as most women were married around 18, 19, and 20 years old. I won't spoil the backstory, but there's a secret here that seethes under the surface. For 1950s readers, these scenes were shocking, but for many women, it validated their private thoughts and experiences that they felt they could never talk about. This was the silent generation, right? They could not talk about these things, and it was shameful. In my tiny little New England town, there was some weirdnesses and affairs going on. Back then, it was usually men doing the cheating, as has been happening for millennia, by the way, either because the wife had gotten too old looking or because of the bad girl in town. And in some ethnic groups, men assumed the right to have a mistress. Feminists cited the novel as a rebellion against the enforced domestic ideal of the post-war era. I don't agree that this was enforced. Maybe some women felt forced, but so much of life is a crapshoot anyway, and things can go wrong and go haywire awfully fast. The Christian idea was to sacrifice the self for a higher good, like raising children. The feminist idea is me, myself, and I, and what I want. And how do I get more? Grace Metalius once said that her book said things women weren't supposed to say, much less think. And again, this was that silent generation that raised us boomers who never talked about anything considered shameful. They were very concerned about reputation. They were very concerned with keeping up appearances and keeping up with the Joneses, all that. That came from that generation. And a lot of the women were dealing with men. Now, how many wars had there been? World War I, grandfathers, World War II, fathers, and for us younger boomers, Korean War fathers. John F. Kennedy was killed when I was 8 years old, and I remember that to this day. And that Vietnam War was on TV during dinner time. They did this on purpose. By this time, we all had TVs in the house, and the news was on at dinner time, which was usually 5 or 6 o'clock. And that's when they put the war on. So it would cause fights in the families as well. Because usually women don't like to watch war, and men are like, oh, you know, we're all gung-ho, right? Because you have to be a man, and back then you had to be a man. And so there was and the younger, like my age group was supposed to be, by that time, even though I was too young to participate in that, we were supposed to be rebels and hippies, and you know, all the anti-war demonstrations were going on in universities. But those people were older than me. Hope you like my little stories. I can bang on. Sorry. The academic feminists get a hold of Peyton Place, critiquing patriarchy and hypocrisy. Feminists interpret this novel in a self-serving way. I'm convinced that these women never lived in a small town where they have brothers and sisters and other kids and went to church every Sunday and had family rituals, because why would they have these views? For instance, Peyton Place exposed the double standards around gender and morality. I disagree. It revealed the sexual and social dynamics that led toward a stable family life and those that didn't. Men in town commit abuses or skirt responsibility, e.g. The Grape by Lucas Cross, while women bear the burden of shame or silence. Lucas Cross is a raging alcoholic who won't work and support his family. He's a monster and he gets away with nothing. The film, though toned down for censorship, still presented a critique of male authority, whether fathers, school principals, or lovers. The film simply showed how society worked. Men had authority. I never had a problem with it because women had it good and just didn't know it. Some people will complain no matter what. They can be living a wonderful life compared to the rest of the world and they will still moan. Proto-feminist text before feminism had a name. This novel became a bestseller despite or because of its taboo subjects, indicating a deep discontent among women with the 1950s status quo. This status quo was uncomfortable for basically selfish women who bought into the Hollywood glamour just like they would later buy into the you can have it all lie. Unfortunately, the squeaky wheel gets the grease and those who were content were silent. Though Grace Metalius wasn't part of the feminist movement, her work helped foster conversations around class and gender equality, reproductive freedom, sexual violence, and trauma. This was caused by more access to university education for women. In the 1950s, I remember my relatives being very upset that Clark University had hired a communist professor. This was who was teaching this negative view of the world. Feminist scholars in the 1970s and 80s re-examined Peyton Place as a proto-feminist cultural artifact. It illustrates life before the feminist movement as it really was. The book and the 1957 film are surprisingly accurate, but all the threads were there for them to hang their little ideas upon, their discontents, their miseries, and their grasping for power. Though often dismissed as trashy or sensationalist, Peyton Place is now seen as a landmark in popular literature that cracked the facade of 1950s American life. It created space for later feminist authors like Erica Jong, Marilyn French, and Judy Blume, who expanded on themes of sex, motherhood, and female agency. And because I am not a feminist, I don't read these books, but many of you might have if you took any courses in feminism. But I will say that Peyton Place was just a kind of a realistic look at small town life in America. Perfection doesn't exist, so there are problems. But certain types of people will focus on the negative because they're communists, a lot of them, they're leftists, and they seek destruction. They just do. Ladies, we had it so good. We had it. And for working class women, I will tell you, being working class, we needed our men. We didn't need for them to be told that we hated them, because that was what was being promoted in the media. We didn't need them to be told how much we didn't need them, because we did need them. We needed them. We had more in common with them than these other things they are in the university. You know, I went to university. I have a bachelor's degree in English literature and art. But I just think that it's so easy to see how the damage that these it's mostly academics, did to our culture. In my next video, I'll go further back into the 1940s to draw a connection with the sexual revolution. So please come back. Thank you.